The average NBA player is about 6 feet 7 inches. The average elite gymnast is closer to 5 feet tall. Usain Bolt, the fastest human ever recorded, stood 6 feet 5 inches. Lionel Messi stands around 5 feet 7 inches. Michael Phelps is 6 feet 4 inches. Simone Biles is 4 feet 8 inches. So here's the question. If the greatest athletes on Earth come in completely different sizes, is there actually a perfect athletic height? Or is that idea completely wrong? Because when researchers, coaches, and scouts look across dozens of sports, one specific height range keeps appearing again and again. Not in one sport, not in one country, across almost everything. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. But before we find that range, we need to eliminate the extremes, because the answer isn't where most people think it is. Let's start small. Athletes under 5 feet 6 inches are often underestimated before competition even begins. They don't look physically dominant. They don't intimidate opponents. They don't walk into a room and immediately stand out. And yet some of the most skilled athletes in history belong here. Lionel Messi, Diego Maradona, Simone Biles, countless elite gymnasts, countless elite fighters. Why? Because smaller athletes possess advantages that larger athletes can never fully replicate. Their center of gravity sits lower. Their balance improves. Their agility improves. Their acceleration improves. Changing direction becomes effortless. Watch Messi dribble through defenders. The ball seems attached to his foot. Watch Simone Biles rotate through the air. Her body moves with extraordinary control. Those aren't accidents. Part of those advantages comes directly from their size. In sports that reward coordination, balance, and rapid movement, smaller athletes can become nightmares to compete against. But there is a limitation. Reach, power, leverage. Eventually, size starts mattering. A taller fighter can strike first. A taller tennis player can cover more court. A taller basketball player can simply reach places others cannot. And that's where things begin to change. Athletes between roughly 5 feet 6 inches and 5 feet 9 inches occupy a fascinating middle ground. They keep most of the advantages of smaller athletes while gaining additional physical tools. Now the body becomes more versatile. Soccer, baseball, tennis, combat sports, track events. Suddenly more opportunities open up. The body remains agile but becomes stronger, quick but more powerful, compact but more complete. And that's important, because this video isn't asking which height dominates one sport. It's asking which height survives the most sports. Mini hook. Because the closer we get to the answer, the stranger the pattern becomes. The tallest athletes don't dominate the most sports. The shortest athletes don't either. Instead, the same range keeps appearing over and over again. Different sports, different countries, different generations, and the data keeps pointing back to the same place. Move into the 5 feet 10 inches to 6 feet 2 inches range, and something remarkable happens. The body becomes a balancing machine, tall enough to generate power, tall enough to create leverage, tall enough to increase reach, but still compact enough to accelerate efficiently, still agile enough to change direction quickly, still light enough to maintain endurance. Look across elite sports. Cristiano Ronaldo stands around 6 feet 2 inches. Roger Federer stood 6 feet 1 inch. Novak Djokovic stands around 6 feet 2 inches. Many Olympic athletes, quarterbacks, baseball stars, and professional footballers fall somewhere inside this window. Not because it's perfect, because it has fewer weaknesses, and fewer weaknesses matter more than most people realize. The greatest athletes aren't always the ones with the biggest advantages. Often they're the athletes with the fewest limitations. But before we call this the answer, something strange happens, because some of the greatest athletes ever don't fit the pattern at all, and nobody represents that better than Usain Bolt. At 6 feet 5 inches, Bolt was considered unusually tall for sprinting. For decades, coaches believed elite sprinters needed compact bodies and explosive acceleration. Bolt looked too long, too tall, too different. Many experts thought his height would become a disadvantage. Instead, he became the fastest human being who ever lived. His stride length was so extreme that he often reached the finish line using roughly 41 steps, while many competitors needed several more. What looked like a weakness became a weapon, and for a moment, it seems like the entire theory falls apart. Maybe bigger really is better. Maybe the sweet spot doesn't exist. Maybe all of this is wrong. But then look at someone like Yao Ming. At 7 feet 6 inches, he was a basketball phenomenon. His size gave him advantages almost nobody else had. He could score over defenders, dominate the paint, and alter shots simply by standing near the basket. But there was a cost. His feet, knees, and joints carried forces the human body was never really designed to handle. Injuries followed him throughout his career. By age 30, he was retired from professional basketball. The same height that made him extraordinary also became his biggest limitation. And suddenly the question changes, because being bigger isn't always better. Sometimes it's just more expensive. Mini hook. But what happens when the body becomes so large that it starts fighting against itself? Because some of the most physically gifted athletes in history discovered something surprising. At a certain point, every extra inch starts demanding a price. Above 6 feet 6 inches, specialization takes over. This is NBA territory, volleyball territory, certain swimming events, certain throwing events. The average NBA player today stands around 6 feet 7 inches. Many centers approach 7 feet. At first, that sounds like the ultimate athletic advantage. More reach, more size, more dominance. But there is a trade-off. Agility becomes harder to maintain. Acceleration becomes more difficult. Joint stress increases. Recovery becomes more demanding. Injury risk often rises. The body becomes incredible for specific sports, but less adaptable overall. The larger the machine becomes, the harder it becomes to optimize every system simultaneously. And that's why extremely tall athletes often dominate a handful of sports while struggling in many others. So after looking across dozens of sports, hundreds of elite athletes, and decades of performance trends, where does the evidence point? Back to the same place, again and again and again. The athletic sweet spot appears to sit roughly between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 2 inches. Not because every champion falls there, they don't. Not because this range produces the best athlete in every sport, it doesn't. But because it repeatedly produces athletes capable of succeeding almost anywhere. Power without excessive weight, reach without sacrificing mobility, speed without sacrificing strength, size without sacrificing endurance. It's balance. And balance may be the most underrated athletic trait on earth. Think about it. A 7-foot basketball player probably isn't winning Olympic gymnastics gold. A 5-foot gymnast probably isn't dominating the NBA. Extreme bodies create extreme strengths, but they also create extreme weaknesses. Athletes in the middle occupy a unique position. They can sprint, jump, lift, throw, fight, endure, adapt. They aren't optimized for one thing. They're capable of many things, and that flexibility may be the closest thing to universal athleticism that exists. This is where the real truth appears. When Messi was a child, doctors believed his size could become a serious obstacle. When Bolt was young, coaches thought he was too tall to sprint. When Phelps emerged, people said his body proportions looked unusual. 3 different athletes, 3 different problems, 3 different paths, and all 3 turned those perceived weaknesses into advantages. But for every athlete who beats the odds, thousands discover that biology eventually wins. The greatest athletes don't succeed because their bodies are perfect. They succeed because they learn how to maximize the body they were given. Messi did it, Bolt did it, Phelps did it, Brady did it, Ronaldo did it. Different heights, different advantages, different weaknesses, same outcome, greatness. And that's why the most athletic height on earth isn't the tallest. It isn't the shortest. It isn't the most impressive. It's the height that creates the fewest limitations. The height that allows power without sacrificing speed, strength without sacrificing mobility, size without sacrificing endurance. So if someone could choose a height before birth and wanted the best chance of succeeding across the greatest number of sports, the answer would probably land somewhere between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet 2 inches. Not extreme, not rare, just balanced enough to do almost everything well. Now here's the question. How tall are you? And after seeing the strengths and weaknesses of every height range, would you actually choose a different height if you could? Let me know in the comments, because the most athletic height on earth might be a lot closer to your own than you ever realized.